$500,000. Cash. Right now." Martin Thorne didn't just say the words. He spat them out like a cherry pit, his eyes gleaming with the arrogant amusement of a man who owned the New York skyline. The restaurant went silent. Every fork in the gilded cage froze mid-air. Martin pointed a manicured finger at Sapphira, the waitress whose apron was stained with spilled wine. "I'll write the check this second," he laughed, turning to his Saudi guests. "If this servant can translate a single sentence of our negotiation, speak Arabic, darling, and you're rich." He expected her to cry. He expected her to run. He didn't expect her to smile, pour him a glass of water, and utter a phrase that would cost him his entire empire. The rain in Manhattan that Tuesday was the kind that didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside the gilded cage, the city's most pretentious Michelin-starred steakhouse, the air smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and old money. Sapphira Jenkins adjusted her apron, wincing slightly as the stiff fabric rubbed against the burn mark on her forearm, a souvenir from a sputtering flambe pan earlier that evening. At 28, Sapphira had the kind of face people forgot the moment she turned away. She wore her brown hair in a tight, sensible bun, and her glasses were thick-rimmed and purely functional. To the clientele of the gilded cage, she wasn't a person. She was a delivery system for Wagyu beef and overpriced Cabernet. "Table 4 needs a refill, Sapphira. Stop daydreaming," snapped Henri, the floor manager. Henry was a short man with a Napoleon complex and a toupee that was 3 shades too dark for his complexion. "On it, Henri," Sapphira said, her voice soft, neutral. The service voice. She moved through the dining room with practiced invisibility. She knew the rhythm of the rich. She knew that the man at table 7 was cheating on his wife because he paid in cash and kept checking his watch. She knew the woman at table 12 was a corporate spy because she drank only water and red lips. Sapphira knew these things because 3 years ago she hadn't been a waitress. 3 years ago, Sapphira Jenkins had been a senior analyst for a private intelligence firm in D.C., specializing in Middle Eastern geopolitical risk and linguistic cryptography. She spoke 7 languages fluently, including Farsi, Mandarin, and 3 dialects of Arabic. She had a PhD from Georgetown and a mind like a steel trap. But that life ended the night the car crash happened. The night she lost her fiancé, David, and the night her own agency burned her to cover up a botched operation in Beirut. She had fled, changed her name, and buried herself in the anonymity of the service industry. She wanted peace. She wanted silence. Tonight, however, silence was not on the menu. The heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open, and the atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The low hum of conversation stopped. The air grew tense. Martin Thorne had arrived. Martin was the CEO of Thorne Global, a hedge fund that devoured smaller companies like a shark eating minnows. He was 35, devastatingly handsome in a predatory way, and dressed in a bespoke suit that cost more than Sapphira made in a year. He walked in with an entourage, 2 nervous-looking assistants, a striking blonde woman in a red dress who looked bored, and 3 men in traditional thorbs and gutras. "Get me the corner booth," Martin announced, not asking, "and bring the 82 Petrus. We're celebrating." "Celebrating what, sir?" Henry asked, bowing so low he nearly tipped over. "The acquisition of the century," Martin grinned, his teeth white and sharp. "Tonight we fleece the desert." Sapphira felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that tone. She had heard it in situation rooms and embassies. It was the sound of a predator closing in. She watched as Martin guided his guests, a Saudi delegation, to the private alcove. "Sapphira," Henry hissed, grabbing her arm. "You have their table. Do not mess this up. Mr. Thorne is particular, and his guests are royalty." "I'll handle it," Sapphira said, pulling her arm away. She walked toward the table, clutching her ordering pad. She didn't know it yet, but the peaceful life she had built was about to shatter. Martin Thorne was looking for a victim to humiliate to impress his guests, and Sapphira had just walked into his crosshairs. The dinner service at Table 9 was a disaster from the start, but not because of the food. The kitchen was perfect. The wine was breathed to perfection. The disaster was Martin Thorne's personality. "This steak is pedestrian," Martin complained loudly, sawing into a perfectly medium-rare fillet. He looked at the Saudi guests, specifically the older man in the center, Sheikh Ahmed Al-Fayed. "I apologize, Your Highness. American beef simply doesn't compare to what we will import once our deal is finalized, right?" Sheikh Ahmed smiled politely, but his eyes were cold. He said something in rapid, quiet Arabic to the younger man beside him, his son, Prince Karim. Sapphira was pouring water for the prince when she heard it. "This man talks like a camel with a throat infection," the sheikh murmured in Gulf Arabic. "Does he truly think we don't know the valuation is inflated?" Sapphira's hand didn't tremble. She poured the water without spilling a drop, her face a mask of indifference. She moved to the other side of the table to clear an appetizer plate. "Patience, father," Prince Karim replied, also in Arabic. "We need the port access he controls in New Jersey. Let him preen. We will crush him on the interest rates in Clause 14. Sapphira bit the inside of her cheek. It was a classic negotiation trap. Martin thought he was the shark, but he was swimming with killer whales. "Is something wrong, sweetheart?" Martin snapped, snapping his fingers in Sapphira's face. Sapphira blinked, snapping back to reality. "Sir? You're hovering. It's annoying. Go get us another bottle, and make sure the sommelier doesn't send vinegar this time." "Yes, sir," Sapphira said quietly. As she turned to leave, chaos erupted near the entrance. A young man in a suit ran in, looking disheveled and panicked. He was sweating profusely despite the air conditioning. He rushed up to Martin's table. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry," the young man gasped. Martin slammed his fork down. "Brad, where the hell is the interpreter? We're getting to the contract phase." "That's just it, sir," Brad stammered. "The agency. There was a mix-up. The translator they sent was stuck in the tunnel traffic and then got into a fender bender. He's at the hospital. He can't make it." Martin's face turned a shade of purple that matched the Petrus wine. "You're telling me," he said, his voice dangerously low, "that I have a multi-billion-dollar deal on the table, documents that need to be cross-verified in Arabic, and I have no one to speak to them? I can try using an app on my phone," Brad suggested weakly. Sheikh Ahmed cleared his throat. He spoke in heavily accented, broken English. "Mr. Thorne, we agree to terms, mostly. But legal papers must be precise. No translator, no signature." The silence was deafening. The deal was dying. Martin looked around the room, desperate. He needed a miracle. His eyes scanned the restaurant, the other diners, the busboys, the hostess. Then his eyes landed on Sapphira, who was returning with the wine. He looked at her tired shoes. He looked at her plain bun. He looked at the ketchup stain on her apron. A cruel idea formed in his mind. He needed to stall. He needed to create a distraction to keep the sheikh entertained while Brad found a solution. And Martin Thorne's favorite form of entertainment was humiliation. "Wait a minute," Martin said, a twisted grin spreading across his face. He stood up and blocked Sapphira's path. "Sir?" Sapphira held the bottle tight. "You look smart," Martin mocked. his voice booming so the whole restaurant could hear, in a domestic sort of way. "Tell me, what's your name? Sally? Betty?" "Sapphira, sir. Sapphira. Wonderful. Tell me, Sapphira, what's the most complex thing you've done today? Memorize the specials. Correctly count the change for a $10 tip." The blonde woman in the red dress giggled. Brad looked at his shoes. The sheikh watched with narrowed eyes. "I'm just trying to do my job, Mr. Thorne," Sapphira said, her voice steady. "Job?" Martin laughed. "This isn't a job. This is servitude. But hey, today is your lucky day. I'm in a charitable mood." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He slapped it onto the white tablecloth. "I'm in a bind, Sapphira. I need a translator. And since my idiot assistant failed me, I'm looking for hidden talent in the gutter." He uncapped a gold fountain pen. "I'm going to write a check for $500,000, Martin announced. "That's probably more than you'll make in 20 years of wiping tables." He scribbled the numbers, tore the check out, and waved it in her face. "Speak Arabic, Sapphira. Just one sentence. Interpret what the sheikh said to his son 5 minutes ago. If you can do that, this money is yours." He leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive brandy and cigar smoke. "But we both know you can't. We both know you dropped out of community college because it was too hard. We both know the only language you speak is minimum wage. Speak Arabic and I'll pay you $500,000, the billionaire laughed, turning to the room for approval. "Go on, try, say hummus correctly. I'll give you 1,000 just for that." The restaurant was dead silent. All eyes were on Sapphira. The humiliation was palpable, heavy, and suffocating. Sapphira looked at the check fluttering in his hand. She looked at Martin's sneering face. She looked at the sheikh, who looked embarrassed for her. Something inside Sapphira Jenkins snapped, or rather, something woke up. The waitress vanished. The analyst returned. She set the wine bottle down on the table with a soft clink. She adjusted her glasses. She took a deep breath. Sapphira looked Martin dead in the eye. The submissiveness was gone from her posture. She stood taller, her shoulders squaring. "You made a mistake on the check," Sapphira said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a crisp, authoritative timbre that had been absent moments before. Martin blinked, his smile faltering slightly. "Excuse me?" "The date," she said calmly, "and the routing number is for your Cayman Islands Shell account, which you use to evade federal taxes. If I were to cash this, it would flag the IRS immediately. You'd be audited by Monday." Martin froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sapphira turned slowly to Sheikh Ahmed. She didn't bow. She nodded, a gesture of equal respect. When she spoke, it wasn't English, and it wasn't just Arabic. It was the specific, aristocratic dialect of the Najd region, the Sheikh's home province, spoken with the flawless, poetic cadence of a native orator. "Your Highness," Sapphira said, her voice flowing like water over stones. "The gentleman asked me to translate what you said earlier. You stated that this man talks like a camel with a throat infection, and you questioned if he realized his valuation was inflated." The sheikh's eyes went wide. He stood up slowly, his napkin falling to the floor. Sapphira turned to Prince Karim. "And you, my prince, replied that you should be patient, because you require the New Jersey port access he controls. You intend to crush him using the interest rates buried in Clause 14. The room was so quiet you could hear the traffic outside on Fifth Avenue. Sapphira turned back to Martin. He looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was pale, the blood drained completely away. "That," Martin stammered. "What? How?" I speak Arabic, Mr. Thorne, Sapphira said, switching back to English, her voice cutting like a razor. I also speak Mandarin, Farsi, Russian, French, and Spanish. And I know that Clause 14 in your contract relies on a Series B funding round that you haven't actually secured yet. She picked up the check he had waved in her face. You challenged me. I won. She ripped the check in half. But I don't want your dirty money. And I certainly don't want to help you defraud these gentlemen. She turned back to the sheikh. Your Highness, if you sign the papers he has prepared, you will lose 40% of your liquidity within 6 months. He is leveraging your capital to pay off bad debts in Southeast Asia. It is a Ponzi scheme wrapped in a hedge fund. You lying bitch, Martin screamed, lunging across the table. Security guards from the front of the restaurant rushed forward, but they weren't coming for Sapphira. Sheikh Ahmed raised a hand, and his own personal bodyguards, huge men who had been standing silently by the walls, stepped in, blocking Martin with a wall of muscle. Sit down, Mr. Thorne, the sheikh commanded, his English suddenly perfect, cold, and deadly. The sheikh looked at Sapphira with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Who are you? A waitress does not speak the dialect of the royal court. A waitress does not understand Series B funding. Sapphira removed her glasses. Without the thick frames, her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and fierce. No, Sapphira said. I'm not a waitress. Not anymore. My name is Dr. Sapphira Jenkins. And 3 years ago, Martin Thorne destroyed my father's company. I've been waiting for this dinner for a very long time. The silence in the gilded cage had curdled into a thick, suffocating tension. The other diners had stopped pretending to ignore the scene. Phones were out, cameras recording the fall of a titan. Martin Thorne stood trembling, his face a rictus of rage and disbelief. He looked at the torn check on the floor, the paper scraps that represented his arrogance. Then he looked at Sapphira. The woman he had tried to crush beneath his heel was now standing over him, metaphorically, like a colossus. You're insane, Martin spat, trying to regain control of the narrative. He turned to Sheikh Ahmed, forcing a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a disposal unit. Your Highness, surely you don't believe this? This servant? She's clearly mentally unstable. A disgruntled employee looking for a payout. Dr. Jenkins, please, she refills water glasses for a living. He pointed a shaking finger at Sapphira. I'll have you arrested for slander. I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage. I'll bury you so deep the devil won't find you. Sapphira didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She reached into her apron pocket. Martin flinched, expecting a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a smartphone. Not the cheap burner phone a struggling waitress would have, but a modified, military-grade encrypted device. Slander implies falsehood, Martin, Sapphira said, her voice cool and clinical. And espionage implies I stole something. But I didn't steal your secrets. You gave them to me. I never gave you anything, Martin roared. Every Tuesday for the past 6 months, Sapphira said, tapping the screen of her phone, you have sat at table 4, 7 or 9. You have consumed 3 bottles of wine per sitting, and you have talked. You have talked loudly, arrogantly, and carelessly. She turned the phone around to face the sheikh. On the screen was a digital dossier, meticulously organized. Your Highness, Sapphira addressed the sheikh. Martin thinks the staff are furniture. He thinks we are deaf. But while he was bragging to his mistresses and his junior partners, I was listening. I have audio recordings of him admitting that the assets he is selling you in New Jersey are currently tied up in EPA litigation for toxic waste dumping. The cleanup costs alone will bankrupt the port within 3 years. The Sheikh's face went stone cold. He looked at Prince Karim. "Is this true?" Saphira swiped the screen. "Here is the recording from October 14th. Date stamped." She pressed play. Martin's voice, slurred with alcohol, drifted from the speaker, clear as day. "Those Saudi fools won't check the soil samples until the deal is signed. By the time they realize the ground is radioactive, I'll be on my yacht in Monaco. It's free money, Brad. Free money." The recording ended. Martin looked like he was going to vomit. The blood had drained from his face so completely, he looked like a wax figure. Sheikh Ahmed stood up. He was not a tall man, but in that moment, he looked 10 feet tall. He walked over to Martin. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. "Free money," the Sheikh whispered. It's a deep fake," Martin stammered, sweat pouring down his forehead. "AI! It's AI voice generation. She's framing me." "I have the EPA notice number right here," Saphira interjected, reading from her phone. "Case number 499 Bravo Delta. You can check it on the public government database right now, Prince Karim." The prince was already typing on his phone. A moment later, he looked up, his face dark with fury. "It is there, Father. Toxic heavy metals. A mandatory cleanup order issued 2 months ago. Thorn Global suppressed the report." The Sheikh turned back to Martin. "You invited me to your table. You offered me bread and salt, and you tried to feed me poison." "Your Highness, please, it's a misunderstanding," Martin began, reaching out to grab the Sheikh's arm. Crack. One of the Sheikh's bodyguards moved with the speed of a viper. He intercepted Martin's hand, twisting it back with a sickening pop. Martin screamed, dropping to his knees. "Do not touch His Highness," the bodyguard growled. "Get him out of my sight," the Sheikh said, wiping his sleeve as if Martin's mere proximity had soiled him. "The deal is dead. And Mr. Thorn, if you ever set foot in Riyadh, or Dubai, or Doha, pray." Martin, clutching his wrist, looked up at Saphira with eyes full of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You're dead," he hissed at her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You think this is over? You have no idea who I am. You have no idea who I own. I will kill you." Saphira leaned down, bringing her face inches from his. "I know exactly who you are, Martin. You're the man who forged the audit documents that framed my father, Robert Jenkins, for embezzlement 5 years ago. You're the man who drove him to a heart attack because you wanted his software patent. You think I'm just a waitress? I'm the karma you forgot to calculate." Martin's eyes widened in recognition. "Jenkins. Robert Jenkins. Henry," Saphira called out to the manager, who was cowering behind the host stand. "I quit, and I'm taking the rest of the shift's tips." She untied her apron, let it drop onto Martin's head, and walked out of the dining room. But as she stepped out into the cool, rainy New York night, Saphira knew the truth. She hadn't won. She had just started a war. And a wounded animal like Martin Thorn was most dangerous right before it died. Saphira didn't go home. Going to her apartment in Queens would be a death sentence. Martin Thorn wasn't just a businessman. He was a shark with connections to the murky underworld of corporate hitmen and fixers. He had threatened her life, and Saphira knew he meant it. She hailed a cab, tossed the driver a $50 bill, and gave an address in Hell's Kitchen. "Keep the meter running," she told the driver. "I just need to make a pickup." She needed her go-bag. While she rode through the slick city streets, her mind flashed back to 5 years ago. Her father, Robert, had been a brilliant coder, a gentleman who believed in handshake deals. He had built a compression algorithm that was worth billions. Martin Thorn had offered to buy it. When Robert refused, Thorn Global launched a hostile takeover. Suddenly, Fake accounts appeared in Robert's name. Evidence of embezzlement was planted. The SEC raided their home. Robert, unable to bear the shame and the stress, collapsed in the courtroom and died 3 days later. Sapphira had been overseas on a black ops mission when it happened. By the time she returned, her father was buried, and her family name was Mudd. She had vowed then to destroy Martin Thorne. But you can't destroy a billionaire with a gun. You have to destroy him with the truth. So, she had gone undercover. She became the Invisible Woman. The cab pulled up to a 24-hour locker storage facility. Sapphira ran in, keyed in a code, and opened locker 404. Inside was a duffel bag containing a laptop, 3 hard drives, a change of clothes, and a Glock 19. She took the bag and returned to the cab. Grand Central Station. As the cab merged back into traffic, Sapphira's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "This is a burner," she said. "Talk fast." "He's called the Dutchman," a deep voice said on the other end. It was the head of security for Sheikh Ahmed. Sapphira had slipped him her number before leaving the restaurant. "The hitman?" Sapphira asked. "Yes. Thorne made the call 3 minutes after you left. The Dutchman is a cleaner. He specializes in accidents, gas leaks, car crashes. He is tracking your phone's IMEI. "I know," Sapphira said calmly. "That's why I'm heading to Grand Central. The signal gets bouncy in the tunnels." "The Sheikh is impressed," the voice said. "He wishes to offer you sanctuary." "I don't need sanctuary," Sapphira replied. "I need a boardroom." "Excuse me?" "Thorne Global is a publicly traded company," Sapphira said, her mind racing 3 steps ahead. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the board is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the failed Saudi deal. Martin will be there, trying to spin the story. He'll try to blame the failure on cultural differences. And I own 4% of Thorne Global," Sapphira revealed. "My father's shares weren't sold. They were put in a blind trust. I unlocked them 10 minutes ago. I have a legal right to be in that meeting." There was a pause on the line. "You are walking into the lion's den, Dr. Jenkins. The Dutchman will be waiting." "Let him wait," Sapphira said, checking the magazine of her Glock. "I'm not the prey anymore." She hung up and pulled the battery out of the phone. The next 6 hours were a blur of preparation. Sapphira checked into a cheap motel in Jersey, using a fake ID. She showered, washing the smell of steak and fear off her skin. She opened the duffel bag and pulled out a suit, sharp, charcoal grey, tailored. It was the armor of her old life. She pulled her hair back, not in a waitress bun, but in a sleek, executive ponytail. She spent the night coding. She had the audio recordings, yes, but she needed more. She needed to trace the money. Using the routing number she had memorized from Martin's checkbook, she hacked into the Cayman Bank's server. It was difficult, military-grade encryption, but Sapphira was fueled by 5 years of grief. By 4 a.m. she was in. By 5 a.m. she had the ledger. It wasn't just a Ponzi scheme, it was money laundering for cartels. Martin Thorne wasn't just a fraud, he was a criminal of the highest order. At 7 a.m., Sapphira left the motel. She didn't take a cab this time. She took the subway. She needed to be surrounded by people. As she stood on the platform, she felt eyes on her. A man in a beige trench coat was reading a newspaper, but his eyes weren't moving. He was watching her reflection in the subway window. The Dutchman. He was good. He had anticipated her move back to the city. The train screeched into the station. The doors opened. Sapphira stepped on. The Dutchman stepped on 3 cars down. Sapphira moved through the crowded car. She knew he would wait for a quiet moment or a crowded bump to stick her with a needle or push her onto the tracks at the next stop. She needed to lose him. At 42nd Street, the doors opened. Sapphira sprinted. She didn't go up the stairs. She went down, deeper into the transit hub, toward the express lines. She heard heavy footsteps behind her. She turned a corner, grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, and waited. The footsteps stopped. The Dutchman knew she was waiting. "Dr. Jenkins." A smooth, European voice echoed in the tiled hallway. "There is no need for this to be messy. Mr. Thorne is willing to pay double whatever you think you are worth. Just hand over the drives." "I'm worth more than he has," Sapphira shouted back. "Everyone has a price." "My father didn't." She heard movement. He was coming. Sapphira pulled the pin on the extinguisher. As the shadow rounded the corner, she didn't spray him. She threw the heavy metal canister with all her strength. It struck the Dutchman in the chest, knocking the wind out of him. He stumbled back, dropping a suppressed pistol. Sapphira didn't stick around to fight. She ran. She burst up the stairs into the daylight of Manhattan. She was 2 blocks from Thorne Tower. It was 8:50 a.m. The boardroom of Thorne Global was a masterpiece of intimidation. Glass walls overlooked the city. A long mahogany table cost more than a house, and 20 nervous board members sat in silence. Martin Thorne sat at the head of the table. His wrist was in a brace, hidden under his suit jacket. He looked pale, but his arrogance had returned. He had spun the narrative. "The Saudi deal is on hold," Martin lied smoothly. "Sheikh Ahmed is difficult. He wanted concessions that would have hurt our stock price. I walked away to protect your investments." "Walked away?" asked Mrs. Higgins, an elderly board member. "CNBC is reporting that security escorted you out." "Fake news," Martin waved his hand. "Leaks from a disgruntled waitstaff. We are controlling the narrative. Now regarding the quarterly vote of confidence." The double doors at the end of the room banged open. "I object to the motion," a voice rang out. Martin froze. He looked up. Standing in the doorway was Sapphira Jenkins. But it wasn't the waitress. Wearing the charcoal suit, her head held high, holding a briefcase like a weapon, she looked like a CEO. "Security!" Martin screamed. "Get her out of here! This woman is a stalker!" 2 guards moved toward her. "Touch me, and you'll be charged with assaulting a majority shareholder," Sapphira announced, holding up a legal document. "I represent the Jenkins Trust. I hold 4.8% of this company, and under the bylaws, I have the right to speak." The board members murmured. Mrs. Higgins peered over her glasses. "Jenkins? Robert's daughter?" "Yes," Sapphira said, walking past the stunned guards. She marched straight to the head of the table. "And I'm here to finish the business my father started." "She's lying!" Martin stood up, panic rising in his voice. "She's a waitress. She served me steak last night." "I did," Sapphira said, placing her briefcase on the table. "And while you were eating, you admitted to fraud." She opened the briefcase. She didn't take out the phone this time. She took out a stack of paper files and slid them down the long table. They fanned out perfectly, sliding to stop in front of each board member. "The Cayman ledgers," Sapphira declared. "Martin hasn't just been cooking the books. He's been burning the kitchen. Thorne Global is insolvent. The money from the pension funds? Gone. The R&D budget? Siphoned into offshore shells." The board members flipped through the pages. Gasps echoed around the room. This is a wire transfer to a known cartel front in Sinaloa," one board member whispered, horrified. Martin's face went purple. "You hacked me! That's illegal! Fruit of the poisonous tree! None of this is admissible!" "Actually," a new voice boomed from the doorway. Everyone turned. Standing there was Sheikh Ahmed, flanked by Prince Karim and 4 federal agents wearing FBI windbreakers. "We received the tip anonymously," the lead FBI agent said, stepping into the room. But given the involvement of foreign dignitaries and wire fraud, we obtained a warrant regarding the servers this morning. And Mr. Thorne? The servers back up everything she just said. Martin looked at the window. For a second, Sapphira thought he might jump. He looked at the FBI agents. He looked at the board members who were looking at him with disgust. You. Martin pointed at Sapphira, his hand trembling uncontrollably. You were nobody. You were a servant. I was a listener, Sapphira corrected him, and you talked too much. I have money, Martin screamed, backing away as the agents advanced. I can buy you all. I'll pay you 500,000, 5 million. You're broke, Martin, Sapphira said softly. I checked your personal accounts, too. You leveraged everything on the Saudi deal. You don't even have enough for bail. The FBI agents grabbed him. Martin struggled, kicking and screaming like a petulant child. Don't you know who I am? He shrieked as they cuffed him. Yes, Sapphira said. Inmate number 001. As they dragged him out, Martin locked eyes with Sapphira one last time. The arrogance was finally gone, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. He had lost to the Waitress. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is distinct. It's a metallic, final click that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of a nightmare. For Martin Thorne, that sound was the loudest thing in the world, drowning out the murmurs of the 20 board members who had spent the last decade worshipping the ground he walked on. 2 federal agents, their faces impassive behind dark sunglasses, hauled the billionaire to his feet. Martin wasn't screaming anymore. The defiance had drained out of him, leaving behind a shell of a man who looked suddenly small in his bespoke suit. He looked at the mahogany table where he had ruled like a king. He looked at the view of the Manhattan skyline that he thought he owned. And then, inevitably, he looked at Sapphira. He didn't look at her with hate. He looked at her with confusion. It was the look of a man who had been struck by lightning on a sunny day and couldn't understand the physics of his own destruction. You're a waitress, he whispered, his voice cracking. It was the only reality his brain could cling to. You brought me sparkling water. Sapphira stood at the head of the table, her hand resting on the leather briefcase that contained his ruin. She didn't smile. There was no joy in this, only a cold, hard sense of balance being restored. I served you, Martin, Sapphira said, her voice echoing in the silent boardroom. I served you your dinner. I served you your wine. And now, I've served you justice. It's the only thing on the menu today. The agents turned him around and marched him toward the double doors. As he passed Mrs. Higgins, the elderly board member who had once vacationed on his yacht, he reached out a desperate hand. Margaret, call the senator, Martin pleaded. Tell them this is a mistake. It's a setup. Mrs. Higgins didn't even blink. She pulled her silk shawl tighter around her shoulders and turned her chair away, staring resolutely at the wall. The loyalty of the rich, Sapphira observed, had a very short expiration date. The doors swung shut. Martin Thorne was gone. For a long minute, nobody moved. The air in the room was thick with the scent of fear. The board members knew that the FBI agents were currently downstairs seizing servers. They knew that the forensic accountants would be coming next. They were terrified that the mud on Martin's hands had rubbed off on them. Mrs. Higgins finally turned back to the table. She looked at Sapphira, really looked at her, for the first time. She saw the resemblance now, the set of the jaw, the intelligence in the eyes. You look just like him, Mrs. Higgins said softly. Robert, you have his eyes. Sapphira felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. Don't say his name, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. You sat in this room 5 years ago when Martin presented the forged audit reports. You knew my father. You knew he was the most honest man in this city, and you let Martin destroy him because the stock price was going up." Mrs. Higgins paled and looked down at her diamond rings. We didn't know the extent of it. Martin was very persuasive. We thought Robert had just lost his way. My father died of a broken heart in a rented apartment because the bank took our home," Sapphira said, picking up her briefcase. "He didn't lose his way. You lost your spines." She turned to the rest of the board. "The FBI has everything. If you were complicit, they will find out. If you were just negligent, you'll be fired. Either way, this meeting is adjourned." She turned and walked out. She didn't look back. The lobby of Thorn Tower was a war zone. Word had leaked. It always does. The scene outside on Fifth Avenue was a chaotic sea of news vans, satellite trucks, and paparazzi. The flashing lights of police cruisers bounced off the glass facade of the building. Sapphira stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. She felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. She had been running on adrenaline and caffeine for 24 hours. She wanted to crawl into a dark room and sleep for a week. But she knew the game wasn't over. The court of public opinion was just coming into session. "Dr. Jenkins." Sapphira turned. Prince Karim was standing near the security desk, flanked by 2 towering bodyguards. The prince looked immaculate, untouched by the chaos, but his eyes were kind. "The back exit is secure," Karim said quietly. "My driver can take you anywhere you want to go. You can disappear again, if that is what you wish." Sapphira looked at the revolving doors where the press was clamoring against the glass like zombies. She looked at the chyron on the TV screen in the lobby. Thorn Global Collapse. Who is the mystery whistleblower? "If I disappear now," Sapphira said, "they'll write their own story. They'll say I was a corporate spy, or a jealous lover, or a thief. My father never got to tell his side of the story. I'm not making that mistake." She tightened her grip on her briefcase. "I'm going out the front." Karim raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Very well. Then we shall walk with you." Sapphira pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the blinding flash of cameras. The noise was deafening. A wall of sound hit her. Shouted questions, camera shutters, the roar of the city. "Ms. Jenkins! Ms. Jenkins! Did you sleep with Martin Thorn? Are you working for the Saudi government? Is it true you were a waitress?" Sapphira stopped on the top step. She raised a hand. She didn't shout, but her posture commanded silence. Slowly, the screaming died down. A forest of microphones was thrust toward her. "My name is Sapphira Jenkins," she said, her voice clear and steady, picked up by 100 feeds and broadcast live around the world. 5 years ago, this company stole a compression algorithm created by my father, Robert Jenkins. When he refused to sell, they framed him. They destroyed his reputation. They drove him to his death. She paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Today I returned the favor. "But you were a waitress," a reporter from TMZ shouted. "We have photos of you serving tables at the Gilded Cage last night." "Yes," Sapphira said. "I was a waitress. And I was a good one. I learned to listen. I learned that people like Martin Thorn think the people who serve them are invisible. They think we are furniture. They think they can discuss their crimes in front of us because we don't matter." She looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. To every CEO, every politician, every powerful person watching this, the next time you treat a server like dirt, remember this moment. We see you. We hear you. And sometimes we are smarter than you. She turned to leave, but the crowd surged forward. The prince's bodyguards formed a human shield, parting the sea of reporters to allow Sapphira to reach the black Rolls-Royce waiting at the curb. As the heavy door slammed shut, sealing out the noise, Sapphira let out a long, shuddering breath. She slumped back into the soft leather seat. "That," Sheikh Ahmed said from the seat across from her, "was the most impressive press conference I have ever seen, and I have met presidents." The car didn't go to a hotel. It drove north out of the city toward a quiet cemetery in Westchester. The rain had stopped, leaving the grass vivid green and wet. Sapphira walked alone up the hill. The sheikh and the prince waited by the car, giving her privacy. She stopped in front of a modest headstone. Robert Jenkins. Father, creator, dreamer. It was a simple grave. They hadn't been able to afford anything more at the time. Sapphira knelt in the wet grass. She didn't care about the expensive suit she was wearing. She placed her hand on the cold stone. "I did it, Dad," she whispered. Her voice broke, and the tears she had been holding back for 3 years finally came. They weren't tears of sadness, but of release. They know. The whole world knows now. You weren't a criminal. You were the best of them. She stayed there for a long time, letting the silence of the cemetery wash away the noise of the boardroom, the restaurant, and the lies. She felt the heavy cloak of her double life slipping away. The Sapphira the Waitress persona was dead. The vengeful daughter was retired. All that was left was just Sapphira. And she had no idea what Sapphira was supposed to do tomorrow. When she finally walked back down the hill, her eyes were red, but her step was light. The sheikh was standing by the car, smoking a thin cigar. He crushed it out as she approached. "You have honored him," the sheikh said. "I have." Sapphira nodded. "Can you drop me off at a subway station? I need to go back to Queens. I need to figure out what's next. I think we should discuss what's next before you get on a train," the sheikh said. "Please, join me." They drove to a private airfield in Teterboro. Inside the sheikh's private jet, which was parked on the tarmac, the atmosphere was different. It wasn't a business meeting. It felt like a council of war. Sapphira sat in a plush armchair, sipping hot tea. "Thorn Global is finished," Sheikh Ahmed said, reviewing a tablet screen. "The stock is trading at pennies. The assets are frozen. The brand is toxic. No one will touch it." "It deserves to die," Sapphira said. "Perhaps," the sheikh mused. "But the infrastructure, the patents, the employees, there are 4,000 people working for that company who had nothing to do with Martin's crimes. Engineers, secretaries, janitors, they will all lose their jobs by Monday." Sapphira frowned. She hadn't thought about them. In her quest for revenge, she had forgotten the collateral damage. She remembered what it was like to be unemployed, desperate, watching the bills pile up. "That's unfortunate," Sapphira said. "It is unnecessary," the sheikh corrected. "I have already made calls. I am buying the controlling stake. I am buying the debt. By tomorrow morning, I will own the carcass of Thorn Global." He leaned forward. "But I cannot run it. I am a man of oil and real estate. I do not understand algorithms. I do not understand the cloud." "Hire a new CEO," Sapphira shrugged. "Headhunt someone from Silicon Valley." "I don't want a mercenary," the sheikh said sharply. "I want a warrior. I watched you dismantle a billion-dollar criminal enterprise in 24 hours. You understand the code because your father wrote it. You understand the corruption because you rooted it out. And you understand the value of $1 because you have worked for tips." He placed a folder on the table between them. "I want to rebrand the company. Jenkins Technologies. I want to give it back to the name it was stolen from. Sapphira stared at the folder. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You want me to be CEO? I want you to fix it, the sheikh said. I want you to take the technology your father built and use it for good. Clean up the toxic waste in New Jersey. Pay the pensions Martin stole. Build the legacy Robert Jenkins deserved. Sapphira opened the folder. The salary figure was staggering. It was more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But it wasn't the money that made her hands shake. It was the responsibility. I'm rusty, she said, repeating her earlier defense. I've been out of the game. The game has not changed, Prince Kareem piped up from the corner. Only the players, and you are the best player on the field. Sapphira looked out of the window at the runway lights. She thought about the restaurant. She thought about the heat of the kitchen, the aching feet, the rude customers. And then she thought about the people. I have conditions, Sapphira said, turning back to the sheikh. I expected nothing less. First, Sapphira said, her voice firming up, complete autonomy. You are the investor, but I run the board. No interference. Agreed, the sheikh nodded. Second, Sapphira continued, we settle all the lawsuits, the EPA fines, the employee pensions. We pay it all, even if it puts us in the red for 2 years. We start clean. Expensive, the sheikh noted, but honorable. Agreed. And third, Sapphira said. She smiled, a genuine small smile. I need to make a stop at the Gilded Cage. The dinner rush was just starting at the Gilded Cage. The atmosphere was tense. Henri, the manager, was sweating. He was down a waitress, the owner was in jail, and the news vans were still parked outside. The doors opened. The restaurant went silent. Sapphira walked in. She wasn't wearing her apron. She was wearing the charcoal suit. She walked with a stride that ate up the distance. Henri looked up, his face pale. Sapphira? I saw the news. Look, about what I said yesterday. Relax, Henry, Sapphira said calmly. She walked past him, straight into the kitchen. The cook stopped chopping. The dishwasher turned off the spray hose. Brad, the busboy who had tried to help with the translation app, dropped a stack of napkins. Sapphira, Brad asked, is it true? You're a millionaire? Something like that, Sapphira said. She looked around the cramped, hot kitchen. These were the people who had shared her exile. They were the ones who gave her Advil when her back hurt, who saved her the extra bread rolls, who covered her shifts when she was sick. I'm starting a new company, Sapphira announced to the room. Jenkins Technologies. We're going to have a corporate dining facility. Best in the city. Organic, sustainable, fair trade. And the kitchen staff gets full benefits, stock options and weekends off. She looked at the head chef. I need a head of culinary operations. Interested? The chef dropped his ladle. Are you serious? Dead serious, Sapphira said. She turned to Brad. And Brad, you're smart. You're good with tech. I need an executive assistant who doesn't panic under pressure. Start tomorrow. Brad's jaw hit the floor. Yes, absolutely. Sapphira turned back to Henri, who had followed her into the kitchen. He looked terrified that she was going to fire him, or sue him, or buy the building and evict him. And Henri, Sapphira said. Yes, Miss Jenkins, he squeaked. You're a pain in the arse, Sapphira said. You shout too much, your toupee is terrible, and you panic when VIPs walk in. Henri flinched. But, Sapphira continued, you run a tight ship, and you never stole from the tip jar. Not once. Integrity is hard to find. She pulled a card from her pocket. I need a facilities manager for the new headquarters, someone to keep the place running perfectly. The pay is triple what you make here. But if you ever snap your fingers at an employee again, I will personally throw you out the window. Deal? Henry looked like he was going to cry. He straightened his toupee. Deal. Thank you, Sapphira. I mean, Ms. Jenkins. Sapphira walked out of the kitchen, through the dining room, and toward the front door. As she reached the exit, she passed table 4. It was empty. The ghost of Martin Thorne and his arrogance lingered there, faint and fading. Sapphira paused. She reached out and straightened the flower vase on the table, a reflex she couldn't quite shake. She looked at the empty chair. Check, please, she whispered with a smile. She pushed open the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The limo was waiting. The sheikh was waiting. Her future was waiting. Sapphira Jenkins adjusted her jacket, took a deep breath of the city air, and got into the car. The waitress was gone. The CEO had arrived. And this time, she was the one writing the checks. And that is how the waitress at table 4 took down the most powerful man in New York. Martin Thorne is currently serving a 25-year sentence in federal prison, and he spends his days working in the prison cafeteria, where I hear he's learning that service is a lot harder than it looks. Sapphira rebuilt her father's company into an honest empire, proving that integrity always pays better than greed in the long run. It just goes to show, never judge someone by their uniform, and never, ever assume the person pouring your water isn't smarter than you. You never know who is listening. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And subscribe for more stories about arrogant billionaires getting exactly what they deserve.